Alone in the unforgiving desert, an Apache woman's desperate plea met a lone cowboy's choice to help. Will trust survive where danger lurks at every turn? Watch how their journey from fear to hope unfolds in the wild 1800s West. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe now and join this unforgettable frontier tale. Let's get started. In the lonely deserts of 1882 Arizona, Liana stood where her life had ended, and something unknown was about to begin. Ash drifted softly across the sand, carried by a wind that no longer felt like home. Her camp lay in ruins, charred poles, torn blankets, broken pottery. Raiders had come without warning and left without mercy. Her family was gone, her voice unanswered by the desert that once knew her name. The silence around her was heavier than grief, pressing against her chest until breathing itself felt like work. In the Wild West, she knew, a woman alone was not just vulnerable, she was forgotten. As the sun sank lower, the sky burned with deep oranges and reds, mocking the fire that had taken everything from her. Liana wrapped her arms around herself, not for warmth, but to remind her body that it still existed. Hunger twisted inside her, but fear was worse. Night in the desert did not forgive the weak. Coyotes, bandits, soldiers, any shadow could mean death. She had walked for hours without direction, guided only by instinct and the stubborn refusal to lie down and disappear. Every step felt borrowed, every breath uncertain. She had almost accepted that no one would come. The world had already shown her how easily people turned away. That was when she heard it, the creak of wagon wheels, slow and steady, cutting through the silence. Liana lifted her head, hardly daring to hope. A single wagon moved along the distant trail, pulled by a tired horse. Dust rose behind it like a pale ghost. She stood still, afraid that if she moved, the moment would break. Strangers often meant danger, yet letting it pass meant certain death. Her heart pounded as the wagon slowed. Jacob Turner reined in his horse when he noticed her figure against the darkening horizon. At first, he thought she was a trick of the light, another mirage born from long days on the trail, but she didn't fade. She stood there, motionless, framed by ruin and dusk. Years on the frontier had taught him caution. An ambush could look like anything. Still, something about her stillness unsettled him. She didn't wave. She didn't run. She simply waited, as though rooted to the land itself. Jacob climbed down from the wagon, keeping a careful distance. He noted the burned camp behind her, the emptiness in her eyes. This wasn't a trap. It was aftermath. He felt a familiar conflict tighten in his chest, the instinct to help wrestling with the hard lessons of survival. He had seen what kindness could cost a man in this land. Trouble followed compassion like a shadow. He cleared his throat, unsure what to say, then glanced at the darkening sky. Night was coming fast. That was when he decided he couldn't stay. He took a step back toward the wagon, already rehearsing the words he'd used to justify leaving. He told himself she might find others, that stopping would endanger them both, that one man couldn't fix what the world had broken. As he turned away, the silence shattered. "Don't leave me alone," she cried. The words cut through him sharper than any blade. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with raw truth. "I can begin a new life with you." Jacob stopped mid-step. He didn't turn right away, afraid that if he did, he'd see something he couldn't forget. He had heard pleas before, begging meant to deceive, promises shaped by desperation. But this was different. When he finally faced her, he saw no calculation in her eyes, only pain, exhaustion, and a fragile thread of hope stretched to its limit. She wasn't asking to be saved. She was asking not to be abandoned. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Jacob felt every rule he lived by pressing against him. Don't get involved. Don't carry burdens that aren't yours. Don't invite trouble home. Yet another voice rose beneath them all, quieter but stronger. It reminded him of who he was before the frontier hardened him, before survival meant closing your heart. He saw not an Apache woman, not a stranger, but a human being standing at the edge of the world. He walked back toward her slowly, careful not to startle her. He offered his water canteen first, setting it on the ground between them, a silent promise that he meant no harm. Liana watched every movement, her body tense, ready to run if she had to. When she drank, tears mixed with dust on her cheeks, not from relief alone, but from the shock of being seen. Jacob said nothing. He knew words could break the fragile trust forming between them. As darkness finally settled over the desert, a small fire was lit between two strangers bound by loss. They sat across from one another, separated by culture, history, and fear, yet connected by a single choice not to turn away. Jacob understood that his life had shifted, though he didn't yet know how far. Liana stared into the flames, feeling something unfamiliar stir inside her. Not safety, not love, but the possibility of tomorrow. And in that quiet space, between ashes and stars, two broken paths crossed, refusing to walk alone any longer. Jacob guided Liana across the shifting sands of the New Mexico desert, each step a careful negotiation with the unstable ground and the wary girl beside him. The sun beat down relentlessly, painting the horizon in hues of harsh gold that mirrored the unforgiving land around them. Liana's hands were blistered from gripping the few supplies she had carried, and her feet ached from walking long hours without proper rest. Jacob noticed each sign of fatigue, every subtle hesitation, and adjusted his pace accordingly, offering water at intervals and checking her steps without being overbearing. The desert had a way of testing endurance, and he could see it written in her posture, in the tight set of her jaw, in the way her eyes scanned the landscape for dangers unseen. He didn't speak much. Words, he knew, could overwhelm as easily as comfort. Silence became their bridge, a way to connect without forcing intimacy. At night, they set up a small fire, carefully keeping it low to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Liana sat across from him, hands wrapped around a cup of warm water, watching the flames dance with a cautious curiosity. The night was cold, the wind sharp, but here, near the fire and Jacob's steady presence, she felt a small measure of safety she hadn't known in weeks. Conversations were minimal, short exchanges about water, the next leg of the journey, or landmarks on the horizon. But each word was measured, deliberate, forming a bond of respect rather than obligation. As days passed, Liana began to anticipate Jacob's movements, the timing of water breaks, the careful way he scanned the terrain for danger. Trust was fragile here, in a land where survival often meant turning away from others. Yet with each shared mile, the unspoken understanding grew. They reached small settlements, but Jacob kept them at a cautious distance, avoiding the eyes of those who might judge or question their travel together. Liana noticed that he never tried to control her steps, never asked for explanations beyond what she volunteered. His kindness was deliberate, consistent and quiet, a stark contrast to the harshness she had endured. Even in moments of exhaustion, when her body screamed for rest, Jacob's presence offered stability. He helped her navigate steep inclines, adjusted the pack she carried, and stayed alert to any sign of danger, never leaving her side, but never encroaching on her autonomy. On one evening, as the sun dipped low behind the rugged hills, Liana paused to look at him. The horizon blazed with fire-like colors, and in the warmth of the fading day, she realized that she no longer felt entirely alone. She finally spoke, her voice barely above the whisper of the wind. "I didn't ask you to save me, only to not leave me behind." Jacob met her gaze and nodded. "Sometimes," he replied, "walking away is the cruelest thing a man can do." The honesty in his tone, the simplicity of his words, settled something deep within her. By the time they reached the outskirts of Jacob's ranch, the sprawling fields and sturdy fences, a testament to a life built carefully and patiently, a subtle shift had occurred. Liana's shoulders no longer carried the same tension, her steps were steadier, and her eyes held a spark that had been absent for weeks. Jacob noticed the change but did not comment. He simply guided her toward the barn where she could rest and clean up, offering space and assistance without insistence. Each evening at the ranch became a pattern of quiet collaboration. Liana helped with chores she could manage, guided by Jacob's instructions, but never belittled or rushed. Meals were shared with practical conversation, often about work on the land, the weather, or distant landmarks. Liana's laughter returned in small doses, a sound Jacob recognized and encouraged without forcing. He respected her silence when she needed it and engaged her when she sought it. Slowly, their lives began to intertwine, not with romance, but with mutual reliance and respect. Liana's trust grew as she saw Jacob consistently act with integrity and care. There were no surprises, no betrayals, no sudden demands. The land around them was harsh, but the safety they found in each other's company was real. As the weeks turned into months, Liana reflected on her journey through the desert and realized how much she had depended on Jacob and how much he had depended on her. Their relationship was still defined by boundaries, yet the bond had deepened. Silent agreements, unspoken promises of protection, and shared understanding formed the foundation of something lasting. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was more than mere survival. It was trust, respect, and the quiet assurance that in a world known for taking everything, some choices could give back. By the time spring touched the desert with gentler winds and the scent of new growth, Liana and Jacob had established a rhythm together, balancing independence with interdependence. Every day brought small lessons, mutual acknowledgements of each other's strengths and resilience, and in those moments, the harsh wilderness around them seemed to soften, no longer solely a place of danger, but also a landscape in which human kindness could carve out spaces of safety. The journey that began with desperation and survival had led to the formation of a partnership neither had anticipated, built on the simple acts of care, respect, and refusal to abandon one another in a world that often did. The first days at the ranch had transformed Liana's perception of both life and people. She had been given not just a chance at survival, but a chance at a life where her choices mattered. Jacob, who had begun the journey reluctantly concerned only with ensuring her safety, found in her presence a steadying force, a reason to reconsider the solitary rhythm of his life. By the time they were fully settled at the ranch, the contours of trust, patience, and shared understanding had become as natural as the land itself, marking the beginning of a new chapter for both.